What is it meant by just relative? What is moral relativism? Technically, as we have learned from moral philosophers, moral relativism should be distinguished from other phenomena. For example, perhaps we cannot answer the question, is it morally permissible to kill in self-defense? It will depend on many factors. We need to know more about the situation before we can make up our minds. It is relative, but this is not moral relativism at all. This is just the fact that to decide about a situation, we need to be well informed. Then we can make up our minds. Moral relativism is the view that even in very specific scenarios, there is no objective right or wrong, and it all depends on the society in question. The idea is that there are moral norms, do no lie, but the truth of such norms is just a cultural matter. Therefore, if culture goes another way, moral norms would change accordingly. There would be nothing more and further in morality. What is the argument for moral relativism? There are interesting considerations that might push toward relativism. Here are three. First, there is the idea of tolerance. Tolerance is good, and it requires some sort of relativism. It is a result of imperialism that one culture is dominating all other cultures. But if we reject the objectivity of morality, then there would be no reason to pressure a culture to change or other kinds of oppression. Second, the idea of dependence on morality to human beings comes to mind. If there were no humans, there would be no morality at all. Therefore, one might conclude morality is relative to us. Finally, many of those tempted by the idea of moral relativism mention the variety of practices in different cultures. They argue that different cultures are different on different issues, therefore there is no right and wrong in morality. Otherwise, why is there such a huge disagreement? The truth is that these are only rough sketches of such arguments. There are not only other arguments, but different versions of each. But as far as we are concerned with these basic versions, we can ask whether they are convincing and support moral relativism. First things first, does the argument from tolerance work? Before getting to the answer, note what it is that we find attractive in tolerance. The idea is that we should be respectful to differences, or should care for others regardless of their religious or political beliefs. Intolerance is bad, since it disregards some values of human dignity, freedom, and so on. Well, you might get where this is going. It seems that to recommend relativism for the sake of tolerance is somehow inconsistent. That is, some values are taken for granted here. The idea is that respect or freedom or any other value used to explain what is tolerance is taken for granted as a non-relative value. It is told that everyone, no matter to which culture she or he belongs, should be tolerant of others. Therefore, to recommend tolerance requires accepting the existence of non-relative values. This does not support relativism, of course. What about the second argument? Does the argument from dependence lead to relativism? To keep it short, let us examine the general claim at the heart of this argument. The existence of morality depends on the existence of humans. So what? Isn't it the case that many things around us would not be there if human beings didn't exist? There would be no medicine if there were no human beings. Does this show that medicine is relative and we can make it as we want? Or think of mathematics. It is safe to say that if there were no human beings, there were no differential equations to solve. Again, this does not make it the case that the answer to such questions as a matter of culture and different people can present their own solution and that they are all the same. We can say that the existence of something might depend on the existence of human beings. Meanwhile, this is compatible with facts in that discipline to be discovered, that people might be mistaken about it, and so on. What about the third one, the argument from cultural differences? Here are two worries. First, it doesn't seem that different cultures are that different. Of course, there are differences, but there are also many similarities. Honesty and kindness are considered virtues worldwide. Torturing or killing innocent people is bad. There are many such examples. If one believes that there are more differences between cultures rather than similarities, a defense is required. At first sight, it seems that the similarities are not rare. Second, assume that different cultures are different with regard to virtues and vices, with regard to morality. But what does this amount to compared with any other discipline? There are some earth flatters. Well, at least many of us believe that they are just wrong. However, they are still earth flatters. Therefore, it is true that people do not agree on whether the earth is flat or not. Can you conclude that whether the earth is flat or not is merely relative and there is no truth about it? Medicine is another example. There are many disagreements in medicine. In daily matters, think of the question, is coffee good or bad? No definite answer. Experts disagree. People are diagnosed differently in different places. For some diseases, physicians disagree on which of the available options provides the best treatment. To make it more difficult, it should be noted that all this is inside modern medicine. In many parts of the world, some cultures have their own medicine, not only famous alternative medicine, but they believe that some magical words or simply a cup of herbal tea do the job in all medical conditions. Disagreement is just huge. Does this suggest that there is no truth in medicine and it is just relative? Or perhaps medicine is a difficult area and people disagree because not everyone gets things right. Perhaps some are just wrong, and some are closer to the truth. Yet we are merely on our way to becoming closer to the truth. Why not say the same about the moral? Are you sure that you are a moral relativist? Consider some horrible recent news you have heard. Some minorities are exiled in some countries. Some innocent civilians are killed in a war. A father has abused his child and killed her. Focus on the last one as an example. Imagine that the father defends himself, saying that, "This is just how we are brought up. It is our culture." Does this help? Let us assume that the father is not lying, it is how his culture has been. You can kill your daughter in such and such situation. Does this make the abuse and the killing just okay? Well, many would say no. There are actions that are just wrong. If a culture or society allows those actions, then simply there are some things wrong with that culture or society. Something normal in a culture does not become moral, and the members of that society are just mistaken in thinking that their practice is okay. And if you are among those who say no to that question, you are not a moral relativist. Note that we haven't specified which actions are just wrong if morality is not culturally relative. The point is that there are some such actions. Here a mistake would be to take matters of etiquette and tradition as morality and conclude that there is some truth about them and therefore not all cultures are on a par. Some must be wrong. Consider the question, what should I wear to a wedding? Well, it is just culturally relative. There is no independent right and wrong about it. In other words, relativism might be true in one domain and not in another. What we have been talking about is moral relativism. Another example is dictator governments or extremist groups. Suppose that you criticize them because they do not allow women to educate or work. They would respond that, "It is just our culture. There is no right or wrong. Who are you to tell us what is right and what is wrong?" Well, if moral relativism, in its simple form described, is true, then the dictator and the extremist are right. We cannot argue with them. In fact, at times they find the idea of moral relativism helpful. You can just label things as Western or Eastern or foreigner, belonging to other cultures, not ours, and then throw them away. That is how helpful relativism could be for some. Here is another way of saying it. If you are anti-racist, feminist, animal welfarist, social activist, or anything similar, you do not want to make the world merely as you like it, or it is not your aim to make the world to accord with the values of your culture because it's your culture. But probably you believe that there is some sort of right and wrong more and above specific cultures. You believe that cultures and societies might be mistaken. You believe that cultures can change for the better, improve, and progress. There is a real difference. The person who brings about genocide and one who devotes her life to helping the poor. There is a real difference between the two. One must be morally better than the other. It is not because our culture says so or that we believe so, but because it is how it is. Perhaps we have mistaken our judgment, but that means that the opposite would be true. There is some truth there. No doubt we haven't had a comprehensive take on moral relativism. Such a task is not easy and takes so long. Here it is our aim to pay more attention to some aspects of moral relativism, some aspects that are at times neglected. The suggestion is that it seems that the arguments for moral relativism raise some worries. In addition, accepting moral relativism has its implications, not all of which are welcomed. Furthermore, perhaps what we have had in our minds is something other than moral relativism. Perhaps what we want to say is that what is presented as morality in a specific society is in fact immoral, or that morality is very complex, so that we cannot decide if we do not know enough, that we need to understand the context of any action, including its cultural context, before we can evaluate it morally, and that some ethical questions are crazy complex. A nice treatment of the subject can be found in Elements of Moral Philosophy by James Rachels. There you would find a chapter called The Challenge of Cultural Relativism.